Back on the SportsMax Zone, and we are about to embark on what we expect to be an invigorating discussion on the history of Test cricket. Here's the deal. We recently witnessed one of the most enthralling Test series in ages as India stunned host Australia 2-1 in a four-match tussle down under. The series had it all. Drama on and off the field, and the cricket itself was quite special. India were bowled out for 36 in the opening match, their lowest ever total in Tests, before going on to lose by 8 wickets. They lost inspirational captain Virat Kohli as well for the remainder of the series, the champion batsman returning home to India to be with his wife for the birth of their first child. Now, the Indians had 11 men affected by injuries in the series: wrist fracture, dislocated thumb, hamstring tear, back spasms, to name some of the maladies. And yet they galvanized themselves on foreign soil to pull off what many accept as the greatest Test series win in Indian history. But how good was that series when compared to some of the others from the past? Was it better than the West Indies trip to Australia in 1960, 6-1? That series, of course, had the first ever tied Test. How about the Windies tour of Australia in 1979-80 when the Caribbean men won for the first time down under? Then there is 1999 when Brian Lara almost single-handedly propelled the West Indies to a 2-all draw against the Aussies in the Caribbean. No real Caribbean cricket lover can forget his amazing 153 not out at Kensington Oval in Barbados. Now, in recent years, we have also had some wonderful Ashes series, but can any of them top 2005 when Andrew Flintoff, Kevin Peterson and company led Michael Vaughan's England to their first Ashes triumph in 18 years at the expense of Ricky Ponting and his men? And we are sure there are more great series you can think of, but that's why we are here today. We are here to discuss where the recent Australia versus India tussle ranks in the pantheon of greatest Test series. Before I introduce our experts, please do send in your questions and comments on this topic by voice note or text to our WhatsApp number 876-564-7661. We will get our experts to respond. George and I are joined by two erudite gentlemen, former West Indies fast bowler, the iconic and most respected of commentators these days, Michael Holding, and noted cricket commentator and journalist Fazeer Mohammed. Gentlemen, welcome to the SportsMax Zone. Great to have you on.
Good to be on the show as always.
All right, well, let's start. Okay, well, let's start here. Just how good, gentlemen, was that four-test series between Australia and India in the history of Test cricket? We'll go with age first. So, Mikey, you have first crack.
Thought you were going with the ugly one first. The answer is difficult for me to say in the history of Test match cricket because, you know, I like only to talk about what I've seen, you know, and from what I've seen, not just in my playing days, but in recent times doing commentary, this has to rank in the top echelons of Test series because, first of all, you have got to consider that it's India in Australia. Just in recent times, I would say over the last decade or so, they have started to look as if they can compete in Australia. And for the first time, they have really, especially with the team that they played in this series, which showed their strength of character overseas. For so many years, India have done very well at home and absolutely nothing away from home. And as we have seen the last couple of decades, they have started to come good away from home. And with this team that they had in Australia with all the injuries, you'd have to say this was a really great performance. Beating Australia in Australia is never easy. But I would think in more recent times with independent umpires, it's a little bit easier.
To be quite honest though, Mike, we have to accept that the trip before this that the Indians had to Australia, they were winners as well. So it wasn't the first success, and it happened, you know, in fairly recent history as well. But the fact that they were so under strength for this assignment certainly added to the sort of glory that they have to embrace for the result.
For sure, and that's why I mentioned with this team, because, you know, they didn't have their best team on hand. Some of them got there late, Rohit Sharma, for instance, and of course, some went home early. The captain of all people, one of the best batsmen in the world, went home after they lost the first Test match. And we saw a lot of comments coming from experts. You know, when you mentioned experts just now, that experts is in quotation, because some of the comments coming from experts after that first Test match, oh, this is going to be a blackwash or a whitewash, as they call it. And India really fought back and did well.
Yeah, Faz, you know, we've been talking to you about this series for the past month, and we went through all the stages of the ups and downs of this series because, you know, it was a very fluctuating series, but in the end, the Indians came out, you know, pretty strongly. I know you're one for the history books, Faz. When we had our Ultimate Cricket series, you were, you know, pretty strong on the Bradmans and the Headleys of this cricketing history, as opposed to a lot of the experts who were focusing more on performances in the recent decades. How does this one stack up for you, and what made this series so good?
Thanks, by the way, for going with age and ugliness first. I'm happy to follow in those footsteps in that regard. But yeah, you know, when you look at it, I mean, and being a fan of the game and really being obsessed with it, it's inevitable that you draw on the historical record, the context, and so on. But just to put it in place, and I noted your reference to that competition we had last year and how I was repeatedly beaten into submission by my choices. But I'll live with that. That comes with the territory of us aging individuals. But this test series, I would put it in my top two, not just because of the nature of the contest, but that very important point about India being so severely depleted. And I think it's even more relevant when you compare it, and I know it's not a fair comparison, with the West Indies situation, with the West Indies depleted squad in Bangladesh and how poorly they've been performing. Yet you have an Indian team losing so many key players. As Mikey said, you lose your inspirational captain after you've been routed for 36. And with all of that, and still you would bounce back at the end of it all. I was prepared to accept, at least from an Indian point of view, if you're talking about the Indian competitiveness, that a 1-all would have been a fantastic effort. But to take it that step further and win 2-1 with all of those issues, all of those limitations, to get 300 on the last day with all of those other considerations, I think it's truly outstanding.
Yeah, I alluded to the fact earlier, Faz, that you are one for the history books, and I gather that you are pretty high on that 66-1 Australia-West Indies series, which must rank very highly in the discussion. After all, it was the venue of the first tied test match, the first test it was. The second and fourth test matches were drawn. The West Indies had won the third test with Sir Garfield Sobers and Jerry Alexander getting hundreds, and brilliant bowling by Lance Gibbs and Alfred Valentine. And it took the very last test for the Aussies to win by just 2 wickets to give the Aussies a drawn series there. So there were a lot of things about 60-61 that would rank very highly. But before you comment on that, do you think when we have discussions like this, Faz, and maybe Mike can get a comment in here as well, that because it happened so long ago, and because the video that we see of those moments would have been black and white and the pictures not looking that good, that sometimes the ratings of some of these performances are a little diluted or a little shortchanged because of the pictures. And of course, the length of time.
I'll defer to the elder statesman.
Okay, Mikey.
Well, as I said at the very beginning, you know, Lance, I find it difficult to discuss things that I have not seen. You know, when you read about things and you hear people talk about something, it's totally different from when you have actually seen it or when it's around your time that you have experienced it. And we know people's memories fade quickly. People always remember what happened in recent times more than what happened many years ago, even if it's many years ago that you actually saw. So I think you're totally right. People, you tend to downplay things that happened many, many years ago. And when you think of even great sportsmen of many years ago, people stop talking about them and only talk about the recent, and they hear them saying, oh, that's the best shot I've ever seen, and that's the best piece of bowling I've ever seen, that's the best batsman I've ever seen, because they only remember and focus on what is recent. And that is always going to be a problem when you come to situations like this.
Yeah. All right. Well, we get you to comment, Mike, on the 1979-80 series, West Indies against Australia, because you were there. Let's get Faz to comment on 60-61, even though he wasn't born then.
Yeah, and I think I wasn't born then. I was 5 years away from being born. I don't think my parents knew each other at that time anyway. But the issue is, I mean, you cannot avoid the historical context of that series. And why it's my number one, easily my number one, for a number of reasons. One, I'm a West Indian, I'm biased. So let's get that out of the way immediately. Two, Test cricket, by all accounts, was dying. at that point. They had just come through an Ashes series. It was dull, it was dreary, the scoring rates were painfully slow, and many people wondered if Test cricket would survive another year like that. So that's one. The cricket itself was outstanding, and as we're looking at some of the images, you can't get better than a tie Test match. So punto final, you cannot get a better start to any Test series than a tie Test match with all of the drama that was intertwined in it. And just a slight correction, Lance, it was actually Australia winning the series 2-1. They won the second Test match. The West Indies rebounded to win the third. The fourth Test match ended with Australia hanging on for a draw.
Yeah, that's right.
Batting for an hour and a half with the last pair to save a draw. The West Indies felt that they had gotten the wicket a couple of times, hence Mikey's reference to international umpires in the modern era. So it went into the final Test with the series at 2-1. And there were 90,000 spectators, the largest attendance ever to see a single day's cricket at the MCG. There were in those days, the WACA was not being used. So the MCG had a couple of Test matches. And it ended with Australia winning by just 2 wickets. And it also ended with Wally Grout, the wicketkeeper batsman, effectively giving away his wicket because he felt that the feeling in the West Indies camp was that he was bowled. The umpire gave him not out. And because of the spirit in which that series was played, I know Mikey will probably say that you will never see an Australian doing that, certainly in his time. But the general feeling was that he gave his wicket away. But in the end, Australia won by 2 wickets. And just to cap it off, when it was all over, again, gentlemen, put it in context. This was a time when the native people of Australia were not even considered citizens. There was something called the White Australia policy, where you had any team going there had to get the virtual equivalent of being honorary whites. Wes Hall made the famous statement when he was in a cocktail discussion about the series, and he was saying, I have been welcomed, our team of black players and East Indian players have been welcomed with open arms as cricketers, but you wouldn't accept my brother of the same complexion who's a better man than me, but he's not a cricketer. So that gives you the context. Add to that the fact that the West Indies had their first ever appointed black captain. We had, of course, George Headley previously. He did duty in a couple of Test matches. But CLR James, the noted social activist from Trinidad and Tobago, had championed the cause for a black man to lead the West Indies. And think about it, a black man leading a West Indies team when they would have been under a tremendous microscope, producing such an outstanding series that it finished with 500,000 white people in Melbourne seeing the team off even as they lost that series. That's why, I'm sorry for bringing it up, I referenced the shameless piece of shabby propaganda that is Fire in Babylon, in which they reference that loss as the West Indies going there and being feted for losing. And that's why your point, Lance, about us not really recognizing the significance of particularly that moment or other moments, George Headley and others, for example. But just take it in context. A West Indies team led by a black man, cricket dead and boring, and they produce an outstanding series, starting with a tie Test match and finish up as being feted as heroes to the extent that the Bishop of Melbourne said that this was a seminal moment, a moment that could bring about the change that was so necessary in Australian society.
Well said, Faz. You've put your cards on the table, heavily supporting the 1960-61 Australia-West Indies series down under. We're going to a break in just a moment. We will return to continue this discussion. Michael Holding and Fazeer Mohammed joining us on the SportsMax Zone today. In the meantime, you can send us a voice note and tell us what you think about our ongoing discussion about the greatest Test series of all time. You can also ask a question of our experts, Fazeer and Michael Holding. Lots of big cricket coming up on the channel in the coming weeks. Look out for India against England, currently world number 2 against world number 4, and this has every chance to be as gripping as we saw a couple of weeks ago with Australia and India. Back with more on the Zone after this.
Back with us on the SportsMax Zone. The fantastic test series played down under between India and Australia has caused us to ponder what is the greatest test cricket series of all time, given the fireworks we saw down under and the miraculous at times performance of the Indians to get a result that many Indian people who are in the know swear by is the greatest test series accomplishment in Indian cricket history, a history that is almost 90 years old, they say. Never have an Indian team performed better and produced a greater outturn than that we saw in Australia recently. And we have two experts of the cricket, the legendary former West Indies fast bowler, one of the authoritative voice of commentary now, Michael Holding, and he's been that for a long time, and a man who is noted for his knowledge of cricket and of course for his work in hard news as well. He's a journalist right around the compass, Fazeer Mohammed, talking to us out of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome back, gentlemen. So before the break, gentlemen, Michael, Fazeer spoke about the test that he has in his #1 slot, even as he said early in the conversation that this India-Australia, the India 2-1 win over Australia recently is his #2 selection. I want to hear you tell us which series you have as your #1 and why.
Well, first of all, I certainly would not argue with Fazeer as far as the whole picture that Fazeer just painted. The social aspect, the political aspect, as far as test cricket is concerned in the early 60s. When you look at it holistically like that, I would not try to argue at all with Fazeer. But why I said to Lance is that I don't like to talk about things I haven't seen, because I was just thinking about the cricket. The type of cricket that was played, the teams that were playing, and that is basically what I was focusing on. But Faz, the historian, the knowledgeable man about this game, putting that 66-1 series in context, I don't think it's difficult to understand why you would rate that as #1.
Yes.
But when I am thinking about a test series, I'm just thinking as a cricketer, someone that played the game, and that's why I chose 79-80 that I was involved in as one of the best series that I have seen and been involved in. Because that was the first time the West Indies had ever beaten Australia in Australia. We had gone to Australia before, we had gone there with some great teams, and we had never beaten them in Australia. And of course, because we were down there in 75, 76 and got properly thrashed, we got beaten 5-1 in a 6-test series. This was just so sweet for us. We had the 4-pronged pace attack. You can see Colin Croft there jogging off with a stump or two. I'm not too sure if he's still, I have none of mine. And of course, with the 4-pronged pace attack, we were able to match Australia's pace. And so beat them comprehensively. It was just 3 test matches, because remember the year before that was World Series cricket. We had been down there as the World Series cricketers. This time now we are going back as West Indies cricketers, which made it so much sweeter, because we had beaten them with World Series cricket. But this is now West Indies. And we had beaten them with World Series cricket. But that was just something that had happened. This now is West Indies and the entire Caribbean people behind us, and we are playing now for the Caribbean. And this, in my opinion, as I've said to so many people, is the one moment and the one series that I will die remembering. Whatever else I've done in cricket, that takes a back seat as far as winning in Australia 79-80 is concerned. I'll always cherish that.
All right, let's then, since you've put that card on the table, Mikey, let's listen to the captain of the West Indies team in that series, Clive Lloyd, what he had to say, remembering how it went.
One of the greatest moments, really, because I think the World Cup, winning it for the first time, was a tremendous achievement. This too have got, a bit of pride in winning this, and I think that the team too has been wanting to hold this trophy for some while, actually, and I'm proud to be leader of them. And they're a wonderful bunch of fellas, and I'm glad for them too, actually.
Actually, that was Clive Lloyd speaking in the aftermath of that test series. So, Mikey, the words of Clive Lloyd there then, do they resonate now as they did then?
To be honest, I didn't hear them because there's so much noise in the background here. I have to apologize to you all. My next door neighbor is blowing some leaves and I have no idea what it's time.
That's fine, that's fine. All right, gentlemen, we have on the table what Fazeer has as his #1. We have what Mikey has as his #1. I think at this stage we can start interrogating why anyone would stick this most recent series between India and Australia into the group of the best of all time, given that we've had so many tremendous test series. Fazeer, if I may start with you with this part of it, and I will use something you said in your own explanation and your own submission on the issue. You said that this series ranks very highly for you, number 2 in your books, because of the fact that India were depleted, showing off their captain and, of course, walking wounded, losing so many players as the series went on. But could not that be used, Fazeer, as a reason why this series can't be measured among the greatest? Because the greatest series of all time would involve the very best players performing to the very best of their abilities, the players with big billings, the players with big reputations, franking those reputations with performances. And so perhaps this series, great as it was, can't be put alongside the very best of all time, because unlike some others that could be put up against it, there wasn't a situation where the very best players available to these teams, or the very best players from these teams, were on show in the arena, gladiatorial battle, test after test. And I want to hear you on that.
Yeah, I hear you on that, George, but I think the essence is the contest. In terms of, sometimes, you know, you're watching an English Premier League game, and it can be a one-way traffic, big team dominating, little team struggling. Occasionally, you can have a fantastic encounter. And I think this to me is the essence of sport, the contest, the issue of rising to the challenge. Again, being routed for 36, losing your captain, losing Mohammed Shami, and continuing to lose players along the way to the point where you get to the last test with a bowling lineup with the most experienced player having 2 test matches, and yet still you prevail. And I think it wasn't the sort of cricket, apart from the first test match, of course, with that domination when they were routed for 36, where you had one side in total control all the way through. It was nip and tuck. Australia found themselves in a real battle in the second test match. Ajinkya Rahane led the way with that 100. And from that point onwards, it was a really gritty contest. And I take your point. Yes, the big names weren't there, but sometimes you get your best contest, your most appetizing, most memorable duel when those in the undercard, the welterweights, the middleweights, the junior flyweights rise to the occasion and give you the sort of performance that we saw over those couple of months.
Yeah, but all right, Mikey, I want to hear you on it, because here's this thing. So many of the big players for India, especially, missing from these series. You didn't have a situation where it was 4 tests of the very best of Australia battling the very best of India. So people say, yes, great series, but best of all time? Nah, for that very reason. What say you on that?
Yeah, I can understand why people will say that, but I have to agree with Fazeer as well, because remember I'm talking about cricket now, the standard of cricket being played. I don't think you have to have the 2 best teams in the world to have the best cricket, because it's about competition, it's about showing strength of character, and it's about skill. And that is what India showed. They showed a great strength of character, as far as I'm concerned, that I hadn't seen too often from Indian teams, especially overseas. But when I think about now more recent test series that I was not involved in, I have to think of the Ashes series in 2005 in England. I think that was a fantastic series. Both teams had some great cricketers.
Yes.
Some household names that will be around forever. 100 years.
Series, as great as it was, you have to put maybe an asterisk beside it, because the premier fast bowler of both teams in the series, Glenn McGrath, was missing at the business end after stepping on that ball and injuring his leg.
Yeah, he got injured at Edgbaston. Yes, when they were trying to come back after going 2-1 down. But that was just one man, you know. That is just one.
But Mikey, that was you agree with me that it was a top bowler in the series, Mikey?
Yes, but if you talk about missing men, then you have to then rank this India team again now in Australia. They didn't just miss one, they missed many.
Yeah. All right, Fazeer, let me ask you this then. I'm going back to the point I put to you, which you handled well, of course, so expertly. Isn't there a case to be made that, look, this series, India-Australia, all right, great, yes, but greatest of all time? Nah, because there wasn't a situation where the home team, the favorites on paper, without Kohli, Australia, of course, favorites on paper now. And so a case can be made that Australia underperformed, and that even had they won the series, somehow managed to win the fourth test or to draw the fourth test and the series finished level, the criticism on the Australians would have been immense. So it wasn't like India beat a strong performing Australian team consistently throughout. India took advantage of a callow Australia team led by a captain who isn't a patch on the men who've led Australia in the past. And for those reasons combined, Fazeer Mohammed, Mikey Holding, we can't rate this series among the greatest of all time. What say you?
I have to disagree with Learned Counsel yet again, because at the end of the day, it is about the contest. If you're going to wait until it's the best 11 against your best 11, you're hardly going to have that happening, especially in a long series. And indeed, it brings off a splinter point about the fact that we hardly ever see 4 tests and 5 tests.
But I don't interrupt your counsel, but I'm saying that we've had enough series that can be placed in the bracket of the greatest, which have had these contests. West Indies, Australia, man for man, the best versus the best. Australia versus England, the best versus the best. And I'm just saying that some scribe somewhere could say, yeah, but this lacked that, even though the action on the field, the contest you speak of, was compelling.
I hear you, but put those pens back in the holster and write about the fact that it was a gripping contest. And that is what sport is all about. You don't watch, and I take Mikey's point about playing that series and it being the greatest for him because an historic moment for the West Indies. But if you look at it, the West Indies were dominant all the way through. We won the last test match by over 400 runs. So in the essence of a contest, it wasn't a contest. The West Indies steamrolled Australia, and a very good Australian team. They should have probably won the first test match as well when Clive Lloyd missed it because of injury. Derek Murray was the captain. But the West Indies dominated Australia in that series. So it's historic in the context of the West Indies winning, but not historic in the context of it being a close contest. And I think when we talk about sport, I think most of us remember the memorable duels. We remember the moments when this bowler against this batsman, or this fight, Ali Foreman, or this moment in football, a great World Cup final, a memorable contest. And sometimes we often even forget who won or who lost. People talk about the 1982 Brazilians because of the way they played the game. So essentially, I take your point, but if you mark it down on the basis of all the top players not being there, I think you have to mark it even higher for the fact that a depleted Indian team was so competitive against Australia in their home conditions. And I hasten to add, Australia in their home conditions, even with some players off colour, 1 or 2 missing here and there, are a really formidable outfit. They hadn't lost at Brisbane for 33 years.
Yeah. You know, Frankie Dettori winning on the even money favourite at Royal Ascot by 10 lengths. Is that greatness? Or winning on the 45-1 favourite by a nose, beating the even money favourite? Well, send us a voice note and tell us what you think about our ongoing discussion about the greatest test series of all time. You can also ask a question of our experts, Fazeer and Mikey Holding. The question we're posing, where does the recent India-Australia 4-test series rank in the pantheon of the greatest of all time? If you send that voice note, pretty soon we'll be able to play it for you. What about the Abu Dhabi T10? Fantastic cricket on the channel once again, your home of champions. We have the big matches, we have the big players and the action, 11:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m. ECT. So you're going to have to, well, you have good time to watch the game in the morning if you're in Jamaica, in the afternoon if you are outside. We break, we're not done yet. We continue this discussion after these.
Back on the SportsMax Zone, continuing to discuss the greatest test series of all time. And we've got a couple of comments from some of our viewers on Facebook. Tyrrell O'Dane says, 2005 Ashes, easily the greatest series ever. Second, he says, 1999 West Indies versus Australia, right after the Windies got their butts whooped in South Africa, and Lara was under immense scrutiny and reminded us why he is the prince. Number 3, he says, 2001 India-Australia, when Hayden was single-handedly clearing the Aussies versus a very, very special VVX Latchman, the Turbinator Harbhajan, and the Wall Dravid and company. He also lists the 2020-21 Border Gavaskar series when everyone, including Michael Vaughan, said my boys would be whitewashed 4-0 after the 36 all-out in the first test was made to look like the Muppet, and his cricket is played on the field, not in the mouth. By the way, since he likes jumping the gun, I predict England will get whitewashed in the upcoming series versus India. Honorable mention, Tyrrell O'Dane says, to the 2000 India-Zimbabwe series when Andy Flower reached godly levels with the bat, one of my favorite batsmen of all time, Tyrrell O'Dane. Tony Pawson says the 2005 Ashes, 2009 Test Series, West Indies versus England, 1999 West Indies Australia, West Indies versus Pakistan, 2000 India versus Aussies were all amazing. They were all amazing, but because so much of the odds were against India being bowled out for 36, captain gone home, 10 players injured. Yes, though they found a way back to come back with a series win, I would give it to them as number one. So Tony Pawson and Tyrrell O'Dane giving their views on this discussion, triggered by the gripping Australia-India Test series that just concluded with SportsMax having live commentary on the series. We haven't talked, gentlemen, Mikey Holding and Fazeer Mohammed so far, much about the 1999 series in the Caribbean when Brian Lara's 153 earned a series draw for the Caribbean side at Kensington Oval. Faz, I remember your radio commentary very well in the closing moments of that. I suspect Michael Holding was on television on that afternoon as well at Kensington Oval in Barbados. Let's start with you, Mike. What are your recollections of that series and how it ranks with the others that we have discussed?
Fantastic series, Lance. Fantastic series and some fantastic cricket and some great batting from Brian Lara. I remember that at one point I was up on the roof of one of near to the commentary position, jumping up and down when things were happening in the West Indies' favour, because I couldn't stay in the commentary box and do that. In the commentary box, you have to be a little bit more neutral. But that was a great series. And with Courtney Walsh at the other end when that innings was being played, everyone thought, well, this could end at any moment. But Lara pretty much farmed the strike and he took control of the situation. And that was a fantastic Australian bowling attack. Not just a good Australian team, but a fantastic bowling attack. Not many bowling attacks that Australia produced better than that one. And that was some very good cricket. But as I said, I don't like to talk about the best ever. I just say it's some great series, and that was one.
Yeah. Faz, do you remember your narrative calling the end of the game?
How could I not remember it? I mean, you build your careers on moments like this, and indeed, when you look back on it and you see how the drama was building and the wickets going down, you just felt something was going to happen, something special was going to happen. You were really wrapped up in the moment. And I have to mention, Mikey Holding in the Sabina Park Test match after the West Indies were routed for 51 in the first Test match in Trinidad. On the second morning, Mikey Holding walks into the radio commentary box, and we were honored because TV people don't usually condescend to be with us poor radio people. So he comes into the radio box and said, today Lara is going to give us something special. 213 he produces, followed by that phenomenal 153 not out. So Mikey has a sixth sense, and I've given up on understanding that a long time ago. But yeah, from the debacle of Queen's Park Oval, to the incredible high and fight back of Sabina Park, to the unrelenting drama of Barbados. But then you see the fighting spirit of Australia, fighting back and introducing someone who you wouldn't even think of, Adam Dale, who's basically an up and down swing bowler, getting important wickets. Shane Warne was actually dropped for that test match. And many people felt that he was reconsidering his international career at that point because Stuart McGill had outbowled him in the first three test matches because they had chosen to play two wrist spinners. But as it turned out, even with a Lara 100, and Lara was criticized for scoring too quickly on that opening day of that fourth test match, believe it or not, Australia were able to battle back and hold on to the Frank Worrell Trophy. So yeah, it certainly ranks up there.
Yeah, Michael alluded to it just now, Faz, and I'll get your comment as well as Mike's as well, that when Courtney Walsh came out to bat, many West Indian fans in the tension of the moment felt, you know, we've got to prepare ourselves for defeat here because we know Courtney Walsh's batting record. But somehow the tall Jamaican looked relaxed and looked comfortable, and he was sending out a body language that suggested, don't worry about this, I've got this covered fast.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, when we realized towards the end, but wait, Courtney Walsh is going to face an entire over here. This is it. This is all over. But the luck was certainly going the West Indies way. Because remember, Brian Lara was dropped by Ian Healy of Jason Gillespie. And Gillespie was bowling an incredible spell in the heat of that afternoon. But Courtney Walsh, as he's done before, and in preparing for our discussion, I alluded to in advance to our team here at SportsMax about the 1988 series West Indies-Pakistan, just 3 test matches. But one Courtney Walsh hung around long enough for Jeffrey Dujon to get an excellent 100 at Queen's Park Oval. And so probably hanging around for an over would be chicken feed for Courtney Walsh after what he did in 1988.
Yeah, Mike, what were your thoughts when Courtney Walsh came out to join Brian Lara with hopes of holding on for the Windies?
Well, I wasn't very confident, Lance, put it that way. But when you're batting with someone of that caliber, they can give you enough confidence that will help you in your job. No, I've been there myself. I batted with Vivian Richards and put on a partnership for 100 and plenty. I perhaps faced about a dozen balls in that partnership because Vivian Richards was such a great player and could control matters and could instill confidence in yourself. And I think that's exactly what Brian Lara did with Courtney Walsh. He instilled confidence in Courtney Walsh. Of course, Courtney Walsh is at one and watching Brian Lara and watching him bat. And of course, Lara taking most of the strike. And Courtney knew that whenever he had to face a ball, all he had to do was just try and block it. And that is what helped that situation. That's what helped that partnership. And Lara took control of the situation then. And, you know, not too many people in the stands would have thought it would have ended the way that it did. But as you saw at the end, the jubilation and the amount of people that charged onto the ground. You won't be able to do that these days in this atmosphere in which we live now.
Yeah, there's a series I want to ask you about, Michael, because of a comment you made that has lived long in the history of cricket. But we'll come to that after we play this voice note from a viewer from St. Kitts, correct?
Yes.
Let's go.
Good afternoon, SportsMax. 1992-93 West Indies-Australia series for me was one, if not the greatest. West Indies being down 1-0 after 3 test matches, having to win the last 2 to win the series, winning the 4th by 1 run, and going on to Perth and taking care of business, winning the series 2-1, coming from behind. That series was a great series. From beginning to end, I rank that pretty high.
Let me hear both of you gentlemen on that. Let's start with you, Mikey.
I agree with him. Again, you know, that's why I don't like to say the best ever, because that, again, I remember that I was working with Channel 9 on that series, and I remember the Adelaide Test match. Darrell Here was the umpire that gave out McDermott with Australia. I think Alan Border was the captain, and the cameras were focused on him in the dressing room. And when Darrell Here gave McDermott out, he had a ball in his hand because he was playing with this ball, he was nervous. He almost threw that ball through the window. And that, again, going to Perth, that just gave the West Indies the flip that they needed to just demolish Australia in Perth. And again, Ambrose in Perth, just unplayable. But again, fantastic cricket, good series, gripping series. Again, I was there wearing my Channel 9 blazer and sweating under my armpits. But you know, we have had so many occasions like that, so much good cricket. And that is why I rate Test cricket so highly. It ebbs, flows, and the great players who can do things at the right moment. Another good series.
Fazeer, your take on that quickly?
Yeah, it was. And again, there are so many pivotal moments. Shane Warne bowling himself into recognition with 7 wickets in the second test match on the last day to win the test match. Brian Lara's 277, his first test 100 after Australia had piled on the runs, ensuring that the West Indies drew the 3rd test and therefore was still in with a fighting chance. And then we saw what happened, as Michael expertly mentioned. So yeah, and again, talking about India-Australia, this is the first time that a team has come from 1-0 down to win a test series since 1992-93. So again, the West Indies, the standard bearers, Brisbane 1988-89, Australia 1992-93. Yes, those standards might be falling, but it just reminds us how great and how outstanding West Indies cricket was for such a long time.
Yeah, gentlemen, we're almost at the end, but I have to get this one in, Mikey. There was something you said that has gone down in cricketing history, as I noted. Something positive, of course, fret not. Yeah? You gave a name to a batsman. 2000, 2001, India, Australia, in India, the Indians winning 2-1. Of course, Harbhajan Singh, that's when he was christened the Turbinator for his contribution to that test victory. And VVS Lakshman and Rahul Dravid, that epic partnership which won that game for India. And was it that series, Mikey, that you christened VVS Lakshman very, very special?
I don't think it was me who gave him that name. I think I picked that up in India.
Well, you advanced it because we don't know who originated it. We always associate it with Michael Holding.
Yeah, but I can't take credit for that. Because when you go to India, in the stands, you have VIP, which is a very important person. You have VVIP, which is a very, very important person. And you also have VVV. That's where I picked it up from, about VVS Lakshman, about a very special. But I wasn't the person who coined it first.
But Michael, talk about the cricket. Talk about the cricket and that series, which many people rank among the greatest ever. They say that series, even more than this one, where there's an argument over which one is number one and which one is number two, but they rate that one, India 2, Australia 1, in India, 2000, 2001, as a high watermark for Indian cricket.
And again, that changed Steve Waugh's thought totally about giving teams follow on. After that test match with Lakshman and Dravid, he said he would never enforce the follow on again. So again, that's a pivotal moment in Steve Waugh and Australia's career as far as principle and tactics are concerned. But those two guys were fantastic players. You know, Rahul Dravid, as we know, his nickname was the Wall. He was so much a wall that they refused to play him in one-day games initially until he showed them that he was capable of playing one-day cricket as well. But as you said, George, Lance, Fazeer, we have had so much great test cricket. It is difficult for me. I'm not going into the historical aspect of it like Faz. Faz is a historian. Faz knows all the statistics and everything. I can't be like Faz. I cannot go into the historical aspect and the political aspect and the social aspect. I just love the test cricket, and we have had some great test matches.
Yeah, and Faz, some people say 2000, 2001, India. Everybody jumping up about what just happened in Australia. They say that is India's, that is the statement test series performance from an Indian test cricket team. What say you?
And I hear that because, of course, Australia were on a world record streak, 16 test match victories in a row at that point. So it wasn't as if they were struggling by any stretch of the imagination. But all of the drama in that 3-test series. So yes, that will certainly rank. But again, because this Indian team was so depleted and showed so much character. And I think that's the essence of sport.
Yeah.
And I think the word bravery is often used too much in cricket.
Yeah.
It's about character, it's about confidence, it's about belief. And I think the fact that they showed so much character, not taking anything away from Lakshman and Dravid and company, but what just went on in Australia was a test of character.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we really enjoyed your contribution. And one more thing, Mikey, last one, and this is for you. Your reaction to Longines awarding Frankie Dettori the award for the greatest jockey in the world in 2020. I'm a huge Dettori fan, but I thought, maybe the matrix is wrong. What say you quickly on that?
No, I think they're going back in history now with Frankie Dettori. You know, Frankie Dettori has been a great jockey for so many years. I don't think in 2020 you could say he was the best jockey in 2020. But then we have seen some of these awards that they accumulate over years and they give it to them in one particular year. So I can't argue with them because I know it's an accumulation. I don't think it was just the year 2020.
Yeah, well, it's fabulous to be so good at 50 and to be getting those awards. And he recently celebrated his 50th birthday. Thank you, Mikey. Thank you, Fazeer. All the best. And yeah, may cricket give us more reason to talk about things like this.
Let's hope so, indeed. Take it, John.
You guys.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Lance. You know, 2005, you know? Anyway, we'll do it another time. We
Yeah.
gotta go.